Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rates and Lanes podcast. I'm your host, Rico Muhammad. I'll be joined here shortly by my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. Once again, Rates and Lanes, we ride again. We're back. We had a little bit of a hiatus last week. We took last week off. I'm excited for tonight's show, though. We have our resident legal expert that'll be joining us tonight, Mr. Hank Seaton. And I have to keep remembering to say this. If you're watching on YouTube, or on the Facebook, like, share, and subscribe to the video, especially if you're on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, comment. And tonight, if you want to get in, if you want to jump on board and participate in the conversation, I'm getting ready to drop the link in the chat right now as we speak. This will give you the ability to join us via video. If you want to come on and ask Hank some questions, just click the link on right there on the chat, and we can get you up and on board, and we can involve you into the conversation. We're starting off tonight, as we normally do, with this week's trend lines report. We are showing that the national average price for diesel fuel has dropped by 1 percentage point, down to $5.03 per gallon nationwide. Spot market tightens ahead of the Labor Day weekend. Of course, we're coming off of the trend lines reports here, and we're showing that the spot market capacity tightened last week as shippers look to move freight ahead of the holiday weekend. That pushes the national averages up slightly for dry vans and reefer loads. So let's take a look into how those loads were performing. Well, let me do this as well. Let me see if I can share my screen so you can see what I'm seeing. And that way, you can see the report as well. For dry vans, we're showing that the starting out up in the upper northeastern corridor, we're showing that average outbound spot market rate checks in at about $2.44 per mile. Moving down to the mid-Atlantic and southeastern region, we're showing that the average outbound rate for dry van checks in at $2.80 per mile. Coming out of the Midwest, we're showing that the average outbound rate for dry vans at $2.78. Moving down to the South Central region of the United States, we're showing an average outbound rate of $2.74. And coming out of the West Coast, we're showing averages for dry vans at $2.63. Shifting gears and jumping over to the flatbed portion of the report, we can see up in that upper northeastern corridor, we're showing that the average outbound rate is at $3.36. Moving down to the southeastern region, we're showing the average outbound rate for flatbeds at $3.77. Coming out of the coming out of the Midwest, we're showing the average outbound rate at $3.64. And dropping down to the South Central region, those last two numbers flip-flop. That average rate comes in at $3.46. And coming out of the West Coast, we're showing an average outbound rate of $2.97 for flatbeds. Shifting over to temperature control portion of the report, moving out of that northeastern corridor, we're showing an average outbound rate for reefers at $2.62. Moving out of the mid-Atlantic and southeast, we're showing average outbound rates for reefers at $3.08. Coming out of the Midwest, we're showing average outbound rate for reefers at $3.14. Moving down to the South Central region of the United States, that average rate checks in at $3.16. And wrapping up, coming out of the West Coast, we're showing an average outbound rate of $3.10 per mile. And so with that being said, let me take back over on the screen here and let me welcome my co-host to the show. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
Well, we're doing great, Rico. Belated happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry I couldn't get together with you for your birthday. Next year in Atlanta, though, buddy, we're gonna sit down to a couple of big tomahawk steaks together. Throw them on the grill.
That sounds like a plan. I'm excited to hear that. And as we know, like I said, we took a little bit of a hiatus off last week. You had a nice, well overdue vacation that you just coming back from. So welcome you back in and everything. And without any further ado, I guess we'll jump right into the business at hand, and we'll welcome our resident legal expert back for his monthly check-in, Mr. Hank Seaton. Good evening, Hank. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well, Rico.
Good, good. Glad to have you with us tonight, Hank. It's been a little while. A lot of stuff has happened since the last time we've had you on. Just kind of catch us up on some things that we might need to be aware of coming out of from our elected officials out of DC. Some things that might be on the radar that we may not be aware of, or anything else as far as regulatory issues are concerned.
Well, the Department of Labor is lining up a number of different rules for publication. They probably won't hit until after the November election, so that's the last great chance to probably head them off. If the way the administrative issue goes, there are supposed to be checks and balances that keep an agency from changing rules. And to change rules, they have to go through notice and comment, and there's supposed to be judicial appeal of the rules. So it's not supposed to be an easy process. But for the past few years, agencies have kind of said, "Oh, phooey, we really don't want to put up with all that. We want to find a way to kind of bypass the idea that you have to make intelligent rules. It really should be governed by who controls the committee." So there's this concept, it's called Chevron Deference, but it is that the courts ought to give great deference to the agency to publish any new rule it thinks in its discretion makes sense. Well, with Chevron Deference and the current makeup of our U.S. attorney, who kind of coined the phrase, it's pretty easy that if the current politicians still control the administrative branch, as they will for the next 2 years, it'll be pretty easy to get things through unless they're headed off by court, and that'll have to be beyond the level of the D.C. Court of Appeals, or they're headed off by a balanced Senate or House. Because the Senate and House, if you control either one, you can kind of put a stick in that wheel. So a lot more than I've ever seen in my lifetime from a regulatory point of view depends on this fall election. The party in power has pretty well messed a lot of other things up, but they're still really very indebted to the labor movement. And if they find that left side of the Democratic Party can be appeased and hold together with a plurality, you'll see a lot of these things. I think they'll particularly help hit in the labor area. There'll be continued pressure on the agency to the FMCSA to adopt SMS methodology. You haven't heard a lot about that in the past couple of years.
No, thank God.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah, but there are rumors that they're looking to tinker with that. Nothing has been announced. I imagine they wouldn't want to get the ire of the public up until after the election. But at some point, safety system we've got just simply doesn't work. After C.H. Robinson case, there's no relief in sight for shippers and brokers on negligent selection. Plaintiffs' bar can basically sue and get gigantic awards, and licensed, authorized, and insured is basically ignored as the standard for carrier selection. So there's no cop on the block enforcing speed limit on all parties, and everybody who hires a guy to deliver a load of mulch is, I guess, basically ultimately his employer is responsible for his safe operation. That becomes a real feast for plaintiffs' bar, but it just doesn't make any damn common sense. And of course, the big effect of that is on insurance costs. I'm particularly concerned that a lot of independent businessmen who are not quite ready to to give up the horse if the owner-operator model goes out, will attempt to get authority, and they can't pay $25,000 to insure one vehicle and make payments on an expensive new used truck, and sign these adhesion contracts that the shippers put out. It's just a terrible, terrible risk. From my point of view, I'd love to have some allies to figure out how to dissect those contracts, and the labor movement, which wants to stifle their ability to be an independent contractor. I mean, guys, it's not really fair. I didn't have any law school loans, but it's not really fair that they would forgive a lawyer's loan, let him be an independent contractor, let him file a 1099, let him be an entrepreneur, but the same guy who graduates from a technical school and invests in $100,000 truck can't get the same treatment. I mean,
Right.
you want to talk about discrimination? That really is saying that we've got a two-class system. If you're a professional guy with a college degree, hey, you can work from home and be full-time and call yourself a contractor. But if you work with your hands, if you're a professional truck driver, you don't get the same opportunities. Right? Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and especially if you've got an investment of a truck and you've leased it on with a company, you're still an independent contractor, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think you should be. Now, there have always been abuses of that, people who would say, yeah, buddy, you're going to be an owner operator. We're going to lease you this truck and you're going to lease it back to me, but
Right.
it doesn't track to a residual. And as long as you're here, we're going to deduct $3,000 a month for the truck and tell you where to maintain it. You leave it when you go. I mean, that's a sham. And
Yeah.
I'm not supporting that at all.
No.
But
Yeah, I agree.
sometimes what happens is the press will go out and pick on one turkey who's running a sham and portrays it as the way everybody does it.
Right.
That's not fair.
No,
Not at all.
I totally agree, and I think that there are, for the most part, these leases are they're paper thin and they're one sided, and they really don't hold any weight. They're just buying an indentured servant. That's what they're really doing. Now there are some honest ones out there, which I've heard of.
Well, developed this concept called tying. And tying means that it's not a legitimate lease to own, in which the guy would typically sign up with a used truck company or somebody who was financing it, where he had an entrepreneurial opportunity. Maybe he was paying it over time, and they were holding the title. But as long as he made his payments, he got to keep his truck. And if he wanted to go somewhere else, at worst, he'd just have the option to refinance his truck or buy it out because he'd have the equity in it. And I cannot begin to tell you how many large carriers who are sophisticated and should know better don't understand that tying is a major no-no.
Well, I think that the last time, speaking of lease purchase, a big major carrier that does a lot of lease purchases went out of business since the last time that we talked. Colonial, they're up there, not too far in your neck of the woods, ain't they, Hank?
Yeah, I've got to tell you that was for me was a personal tragedy. The woman who ran Colonial was a good personal friend. She absolutely did it right. She had an owner-operator model. She had a separate leasing company. She treated her people fairly. She would have been my nominee for Woman in Trucking. She was with us in the battles over SMS. She was knew Jimmy Duncan. That was a good guy to know. I can't say enough about her. I knew that she'd gotten of an age. Her husband's older, and she was looking to sell. And I was really very surprised to hear that she liquidated the company, but it was the right move. It was just absolutely the right move. The market for sale of large companies, particularly owner-operator models, is really pretty dicey because nobody wants to come in and take the risk of having an independent contractor model file and have all of these rates that you can't hold to, and operators quit, try to make the migration over to the power only. And similarly, she was financing the trucks and putting it through a leasing company. She was doing it right. She had a lot of equity in equipment. She had a lot of equity in terminals. And if you want to own a big company, most of them are going to say, well, we'll pay you overtime. We'll pay you a commission. You hang around for 6 years and just trust us. We won't merge it or sell it off. And, you can get half of your returns and as a sales commission. A lot of those things, guys, really aren't all that, when you dissect them, they aren't all that attractive.
They're buying you with your money.
Huh?
They're basically
well, I mean, if unless you're a greedy person, if you get of a certain age and you got more than enough money to retire and it's clean, I think your first option is, if you're going to, sell it at face value, be sure that whoever you sell to is going to treat your people right.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. So, as well, we talked. I think that we had a conversation, and this thing kind of went rearing its head back up again as well. We're talking about the infamous dispatch services that are out here going around. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to drop down. There's a link there. If you got a question, you can drop your question into the chat, or you can click on the link. There's a hyperlink that's in the chat. If you want to come on board and ask a question, you have the ability to do so. You can click on it. You can join us via video. We'll welcome you up and on board, whichever way you feel most comfortable doing it. By all means, do so. But I had a friend of mine that was here out of the Atlanta area that he had someone that was basically kind of took his name of his company and was running a dispatch service and was getting other owner operators to give him power of attorney of their authority and booking loads on them, but he didn't necessarily have an MC number or anything. So when the owner operators was trying to get back in contact with the dispatch service, they went to look on FMCSA, and of course they didn't have any DOT numbers. So what he did was they looked up by the company name. They found my friend's company, and so they started contacting him, thinking that he was the dispatch service.
Right.
So it kind of threw a little bit of a monkey wrench in the thing, so to speak. But Hank, what are some practical tips that you might be able to give people to kind of help prevent them from maybe being able to do some due diligence if they? I don't know why anybody want to sign up for a dispatch service anyway, to give somebody.
No, I mean,
another percentage of your
I think
money
this
that you make
I
anyway,
think this dispatch service was crooked from the very beginning, from what I hear it, because most people with the dispatch service sale say, well, gee, because I'm not handling the money, I'm not a broker. Now, that's not true. If they arrange for transportation for compensation, whether they're billing and collecting the money isn't the issue. But they say that they're a dispatch service because they're just acting as an agent setting up the loads, and that the actual billing of the load should go from the customer or the broker to the actual carrier. Now, here's the issue. They get in there and redirect the money so that the shipper thinks that he is talking to a legitimate carrier.
Right.
And yet the billing and invoices comes from somebody else and it's paid. It may be that he thinks he's doing business with it. He gets an invoice from Chuck Snow LLC, and the money's deposited before the shipper realizes there's a problem. The first thing you got to do if and I'm going to do a webinar on this. I've got it outlined, and I'm really doing it primarily for property brokers because they're getting scammed so much,
Right.
and they're so pig-headed in terms of what they're doing. They need an education. The first thing is I'm adding to broker protocols that there's a security protocol, and the carrier must agree that the attached bill of lading will be the operative document, and that it will show the name of the carrier. It'll show the broker as a third-party bill to, and that the document will make very clear to any carrier picking it up that, hey, Bubba, if snow transport isn't the one on the side of the door, don't turn it loose. Now, that obligation then needs to go downstream to the customer, and the broker needs to get over the idea that he's going to play don't ask, don't tell who the carrier is. Because the shipper to obtain a chain of custody needs to verify the name and the MC number on the door being the name and the MC number of the authorized carrier provided to him by the broker.
You know, Hank, I have to comment here. This protocol that you've described has to become regular course of doing business if we're ever going to stop all of the frauds, the double brokerage, and all the rest of the stuff that we are seeing today in the industry. This is the only way we can stop it, and it's got to be an effort between the carriers and the brokers when they're talking to the shippers, and we have to educate the shippers that.
Yeah, I've got a situation. And that thing I did on the dispatch services, I put 3 horror shows in there. One was a theft of a whole lot of copper wire, where nobody bothered to check that name brand carriers didn't pick them up. 7 one-truck Charlies picked it up, and the freight was diverted to Chicago and was stolen, and nobody would chase the $3.7 million. But you got to ask yourself, why in the world were we so sloppy that care, custody, and control of a $500,000 load of copper wire was given to some dude who bumped the dock and said, I'm here to pick shipment 1003 going to Happig, New York. And that was all that was asked. And the bill of lading didn't even have a place for the carrier. Chuck, you told me you thought that 65 to 70% of the bills of lading cut in the country didn't even have the name of the carrier.
I agree.
You start talking.
Probably more than that.
You start talking about things like FSMA, where you got chain of custody control, and you're ultimately accountable for showing that the carrier who made the pickup is FSMA compliant. And then you start worrying if somebody gets really, really sick, and FDA wants to run a chain of custody, and nobody knows who picked it up. Nobody knows who delivered it. There's major issues there. So what I'm putting into the protocol, and this would be a uniform protocol that everybody could expect, it would just have basic principles. Broker will identify the retained carrier. This shipping document shall supersede anything else issued. Carrier shall bill broker only, and has no recourse to consignor or consignee, notwithstanding any other bill of lading. This document should be used at point of origin to confirm care, custody, and control, and consignor should ensure that the retained carrier makes pickup. And, that satisfies vicarious liability. It satisfies fraud. There's nothing to say a guy can't go out and stick a silly placard on the side of the truck. But, if you really got a high value shipment, I think you ought to insist on maybe the tag numbers and something else.
Well, Hank, I got to tell you, I've been in plants myself where you get in there and they want the drivers. You have to put your driver's license out, and they actually photograph it. They make a copy of your driver's license so that it's not just some guy that stole a truck at the truck stop 2 hours earlier. It's actually they've got the information on the driver, and they look at your picture to make sure that the guy that if the driver's license says that this person is 45 years old, he's not 16 and he's not 92.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I was thinking the other day, as everybody's going to power only, that dude is pulling off that lot not only with the shipper's load of goods, he's pulling off that lot if it's a reefer with $30,000-$40,000 worth of your equipment. Moreover, if the reefer's got traffics on the side of it, you're picking up a whole lot of vicarious liability. So why shouldn't you expect at least the same from the guard at the gate that you have if you go rent a damn car and pull it off the airport? They don't let you out without verifying that your name's on the contract and you've got a driver's license.
And you know what? And that's a $40,000 car that's got 50,000 miles on it now. And we're talking here, any load of freight that we pick up is worth usually more than that. So you're 100% right. And a lot of these places are just lax in their security, and of course the crooks are having a field day all over the place.
We got a good point here from Justice Champ. A lot of brokers, I've seen this on a lot of contracts as well. He says, I've seen brokers put on rate confirmations that you must check in under the broker's name.
Why that is? Because the broker has probably represented himself as a carrier.
That's number one. They don't want to, it could very well be that the broker is an affiliate of the carrier, and this is excess capacity, and he probably doesn't even have the authority to double broker. That's number one. But I think the primary thing is they're so jealous of protecting their name,
right?
Yes.
That they want to be the vendor of choice because they can grab it all under a contract. If they've got a household name, they don't want their cheapo shipper saying, well, gee, I have seen a whole lot of traffic trucks in here the past 6 months. Why don't we call them? We got to figure out this big broker is scamming 40% off the freight rate. So, a lot of that goes back to the old idea of you want to protect your turf against back solicitation. But I don't think you got clauses for that. If your shipper wants to run from you and solicit somebody else,
Well, you don't want them as a broker. You do not want customers like that anyway. So you learn that very very early in this business if you're going to run a successful brokerage business. And I think the proper way to do it is to go in under, if Traffics gives Rico a load, it's I'm here for Traffics, it's Crescent Carriers here for Traffics. And our people would probably say, Crescent Carriers is coming in, they've got trailer number 1407, and they're picking up that load from Charlotte going down to Atlanta. cut and dried, and that gives a little bit more information. If the shipper's even got his act together enough to do something with that data to
Well,
protect
that's
themselves.
part of the issue. Because people are going to the power only model, I'm recommending that for carriers who are now needing to outsource what was former owner operator freight, they set up a freight forwarder affiliate. The reason for doing that is a freight forwarder is a non-asset based carrier. They can get the cargo insurance and say, we'll handle your cargo claims, without you having to wait for Progressive to deny it. Big deal.
Right.
That's a value added. But then number two, that lets you take your load confirmation sheet and quickly make it into an effective bill of lading. So you follow the protocol of saying it's uh, traffic's freight forwarding, bill of lading with them up in a big corner. It should say this shipping document shall be used as a receipt and shall trump any other document, and then just have in it the very basic things you want. On it, put the name
Right.
of the carrier and what would be a section 7, but language that says carrier to bill freight forwarder only for rates. And, you'd still have the obligation to pay when you got paid under the regulations. But
Right.
then on the load, on the bottom of the load confirmation sheet would be used as a load confirmation sheet to the customer. And it would say, note, forwarder security conditions apply, ensure that name carrier makes pickup at point of delivery, and that non-conforming bills of lading or receipt for goods only. So ultimately, if the damn consignee is too stupid to want the driver on the dock and doesn't care who he gives his freight to, then maybe he deserves to be burned. But if you've done all the things you can in terms of establishing a decent chain of custody thing, it can work. I've got this one case. I've got this one case pending for a client who did it about as nearly right as you can, in that he issues a bill of lading. The bill of lading says on it every time, send freight bill to, with the name, with his
Right.
name, and then it's got carrier shall be XYZ. So,
Yep.
now we've got one of these major fraudsters turned a bunch of cases landed in Baxter Bailey's hand, and
Right.
our defense is, look, your clients had to be stupid. They came in, they picked up a bill of lading that was consigned to a stranger that's in freight bill to a stranger, and now they're whining that somehow excuse the stupidity. The case law says that you ain't got recourse if somebody signs Section 7 or otherwise indicates on the bill that recourse doesn't apply. Well, I think you got pretty doggone close when the bill of lading is the shipping document that's used, and lo and behold, the carrier doesn't stand up and ask a question. And I'm putting into the protocol that constantly, if a third party carrier appears and insists to be loaded, call our dispatch, because you need to know before you load the turkey and let him get out of the yard.
Yeah, I agree.
So I hope this is doesn't get tied up in the detail with the fighting battles between little carriers, big carriers, and shippers, because we're all in that one together.
We are. Everybody has been. I've heard of the smallest carriers being victims of these fraudsters, and I've seen where the biggest carriers have been victims. And brokers of all sizes. You've got to have eyes in the back of your head. You've got to have good, strong security protocols today, because these guys are slick.
So we got Just chiming back in with us again regarding the dispatch services. What needs to be done for a carrier that has signed the power of attorney to a fraudulent dispatch service and has been scammed out of money?
Well, first of all, issue a revocation of the power of attorney. But second of all, even if the guy calls himself a dispatch service, and even if you sign that power of attorney, in my view, if he handled the money and ripped you off, he violated the broker regulations, which gives you recourse to anybody that was involved in the scam. Okay. So he signed the power of attorney. The only cover he's got for that is the argument that the agency hadn't even adopted yet that says, well, I didn't handle the money, so I didn't have to have a broker's license. But in this case, he either handled or diverted the money. That was one of the things that we made in the argument against the dispatch service. We said, just because he doesn't directly bill and collect the money doesn't mean that the dispatch service can't divert the money and take the proceeds.
Right.
I mean, all of dispatch service has to do is to factor the receivables and take an advance. I mean, there's all kinds of way that once you control the freight and the billing process, you can divert it through a third party into your own pocket, and that don't change the fact that you're a broker and have trust accounting responsibility.
But I have a question though, Hank. How is a dispatch service able to factor their receivables? There should, if it's an actual dispatch service, a bona fide dispatch service, how there's no receivables to factor hardly. What, the $100 a month or whatever these carriers pay?
Well, they'll say what I have seen them do is I have seen them defraud the factor into cutting the invoice and sending the invoice through. So for a long period of time, the factor has factoring the receivables, sending freight bills to XYZ factor, and then when the factor gets the money or takes the advance goes to the mailbox of the fraudster. What I'm saying is it's not, they redirect the money so that it falls in their hands via an advance, but it's not that they're ever putting their name out there as anything else other than an agent. Right. What they're claiming they're doing is, how can you be a multiple agent for 500 people and keep them straight? There is an advantage. Obviously, when a little guy can't go find shipments and he doesn't want to be lost at the gate post of having to give up 20 or 30% on a load, to have somebody that can help him find loads. But it needs to be done under the auspices of a discount brokerage arrangement.
The
only way to do it.
I got to tell you, the only way I can see the dispatch service being justified is if you're doing partial loads, because that moves quick. You're driving through Denver, and there happens to be 4 skids that you can use, and the dispatch service has their eyes on it. And if you're a one truck Charlie, you're not able to do it because you're driving, so you can't keep your eyes on the load board. So I can see it for that. But on the other side, if it's done legitimately, those numbers aren't usually that much because it's all partial loads. But I can't understand why any trucker in his or her right mind would use a dispatch service if they're in the full load business.
They're the auto haulers are particularly the guys that have haul 3 or less. The little auto haulers. They maintain very vociferously. They even have a call show like this with a whole bunch of dispatch services on it, and they say that these guys fulfill a real need. because they're assembling it one car at a time.
Right, which is same as freight. It's, I've been in both businesses.
But look, all I'm really saying is, at the end of the day, when you can get a $75,000 broker's bond that stands for your fidelity and not have to deal with this issue, that is not a big entry fee.
I agree.
That is just not a basis for going through this halfway slimy. Well, I got to show you an agency arrangement, and you've got a problem checking me out. And if you want to sue me, you can't find me because I'm not on the FMCSA records. I'm a voice at the end of the phone. I mean, a little bit of credulity needs to be there. And I think it's a $75,000 bond and what comes with it, which is not just that you're going to handle the money, but some really rather important things with respect to kickbacks, with respect to there's a whole litany in that brief of other things that come with it in terms of misrepresentation and fraud and some oversight. I mean, it's kind of like some guy saying, "Well, I didn't take the bar, I didn't pass the bar, I don't have a bar license, but I did a lot of homeschooling on it, so let me represent you in court." It just doesn't pass the smell test. Well, and trust me, the entry requirements for a broker aren't very strong.
No. At the end of the day, Hank, you just hit the nail on the head, because basically that's what it is. They on social media, all the rage right now is people selling people courses on how to do dispatch services. That is all. So it's basically, a home. I don't even want to go so far as to say it's a home course, because I mean, none of it's regulated by anything. I mean, anybody can just put anything together, slap a binder on it, and put it in the mail and tell you, I'm selling you some education. I'm giving you a dispatch course.
Right.
But there's literally nothing to show. And the people that are selling a lot of these courses, in my humble estimation, are not making the money that they claim to be making. They're making the majority of their money off selling you a course. They're selling you this.
You know what? It's only common sense. If you remember, about 20 odd years ago, there used to be a guy on TV, Tommy Woo, and he had these bikini wearing women all over these big power boats, and he was going to tell you how to get rich investing in real estate. Well, he was selling these courses, and it's the same thing. If somebody is really getting rich selling real estate or on the stock market or bonds or whatever it is, they're not telling you how to do it because they don't want the competition.
And like I say, we live in the age of unfortunately, this is the age of the scammer, and on Instagram and Facebook, there are more than one way that you can make yourself look like you're very successful. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money to go out and rent luxury cars and even to go out to the private airport. You'll see these guys look like they're getting on a private jet and all this.
Yeah, you're going there to empty the ashtrays and clean the seats.
let me tell you guys something else that, in terms of qualifying these dudes, that I'm coming to, and that is, we got this big wide universe where we got hundreds of thousands of brokers and carriers, and everybody wants to do business with somebody that's a stranger, and they got to make the decision right now. Well, the FMCSA website can be manipulated. What I think you ought to do, and in the old school, you used to do this. If you're going to do business with a broker or a carrier, you said, "Hey, give me 5 references." Okay, and you could look at the 5 references, and you can see he's in Rancho Cucamonga, and all of his references were within 10 miles of that. They were probably his brother-in-law.
Yeah.
But if you get back from a broker a list of 10 references and you don't recognize anybody's name, then you probably need to say, "Hey, Bubba, did you got anybody you do business with down here in Alabama? Give me somebody down here in Bama." because these people, they can say anything on the internet. I think at some point that the old school works best. I've got a guy who's in a transaction, and he was sending me, somebody had given him a list of carriers that they said were in his marketplace. Well, he had a list of 500 carriers, and I looked down at the people that were in there ran everywhere from soup to nuts. There were flatbed haulers, there were reefer haulers, there were auto haulers, there were LTL people. It wasn't a qualified list by any means. I think anybody who's been around for a while ought to be able to play the do you know game and find out if the guy's halfway legitimate. And maybe in the process, you'd find out that, yeah, he's big, but boy, he'll cheat you out of everything.
Yeah.
So referencing, I think, is important.
100%. It goes back to what we talk about all the time. It's, it's relationships. And you have to build those relationships, and it doesn't happen overnight.
And there, I heard a presentation by a guy at NFI, which is a huge carrier. Oh, yeah. He was speaking at a conference, and he was talking about security, and he said that their security included in the vetting system figuring out how many trucks they had and setting a quota to police how many shipments they had if they were a stranger, based upon their capacity, and also to get things like VIN numbers on equipment and the personal cell number of the driver and all of that kind of thing, and to monitor their daily progression. I want to ask you guys something. This is something I've been thinking about for security. I don't know why it's not used. In the old days, people used to take what do they call those things? Throw them in the back of a trailer and they ping wherever the trailer was. Low jack.
Yep.
A low jack. When we got so much crap like this going on, why don't people just throw a low jack in the back of this? Because I know one scam bunch that had been put out of business because they kept saying they were broken down out in the middle of Montana and there was nothing there.
Right.
Why don't people use low jacks?
Well, they got that. There's technology now. There are things that are much smaller and
less obtrusive.
But I'm not sure. That's a great question, Hank. I'm not sure if it's why it's not why it's something that's not more widely used. I know that a few companies do have some type of tracking or whatever, and I even seen something. I think I seen something last week that they're creating some type of a label or something that you can put that's reusable that can track shipments. You can put them in the back of the trailer, and it can track it can track the load. It can track the temperature of the load, the whole nine.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess you would think if you were talking about a chain of security and you given a load, transcontinental load, and it was delayed in delivery, you'd like to know exactly where that sucker was, and then if he started telling you, oh, you're 10 miles out, and he hadn't left home, maybe that's the time to send the sheriff.
Yeah, totally. And the technology is there. I just don't think it's being used to its full advantage.
So
put a shrimp or something like that's worth a bunch of money. Heck, throw one of those low jacks in there. In among the shrimp. Particularly on a load and count. Thieves are never going to cut it, follow it.
Some of those loads are actually there is tracking devices on them, and the carrier is not made aware.
Yeah,
and the load is being tracked because, especially some of those loads of seafood, where you have a load of shrimp or lobster or Alaska king crab, that's worth a lot of money, and they want to make sure that even if the number one chain of custody isn't broken. because a load of shrimp, if somebody loses loses custody of it and it gets stolen, it's for a short period of time, they won't take it.
Question.
They don't want it. They won't take receipt of it.
I got a question for you, Hank. And I know it's kind of, this might be a little difficult one, but do you think that, I guess they may not have the personnel to do it, but are they, would anybody ever face any kind of, do you think, face any kind of repercussions or anything when it comes down to dispatch services and all that stuff? Because right now these people are just operating in broad daylight like that, any other legitimate business, and that they don't have to worry about any kind of pressure or anything coming down from them from any from a legal standpoint. Is there any kind of way that there may be some enforcement that may ever take place as far as that's concerned?
Well, it's not a pretty sight. The FMCSA's got a hotline, and they take reports, but Carrier 411 has a hotline, and there are a whole lot of other hotlines, and per se, I don't see them being very effective. The FMCSA does not have a budget deal with white collar crime, and I don't think they want one. When we made that filing I was talking about, one guy called me up. He's with another small trucking company, a trucking organization, and he said, "Look, you were right on." He said, "We filed a petition with the FMCSA to chase one of these frauds, and the letter we got back from them said it wasn't their jurisdiction to contact the Postal Service."
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you, the Postal Service is so swamped with, they still even alive with internet fraud. They don't have the expertise to do it. They don't have the power. I think it would take getting this to a political issue to the level that somebody like DOT above FMCSA, really, who thinks that their only deal is safety, but somewhere in the OIG or something to set up a task force. I have asked whether or not we could find an ambitious DA who would take it on as white collar crime, and try to make a name for himself. But that's the very problem with interstate commerce. It's not localized.
Right.
So, I would think, I don't mean to cast asparagus, as a friend of mine says, on local prosecutors, but I think most of the problem originates in California, and their DAs have got so much problems. They're not certainly going to try to open up cases that benefits people in Arkansas and Tennessee. So where we go is a problem. Now, if somebody wanted to finance it and give us some money, there is, particularly with respect to broker abuse, there's self-help provisions that say that anybody that's involved in the fraud can be subject to civil forfeiture and penalties and attorney's fees. Anybody affected by it can sue them. So, you take one of these big scams, like the purity scam or the quality scam, and you got 178 motor carriers who lost 1.9 million bucks. If I could all pass the hat and have them give me 10% of that, I'd love to go find that dude. I mean, he's pretty wide open. You start two companies a week apart, use your same name on them. One's a carrier, one's a broker. They're 50 miles apart in Rancho Cucamonga and Diamond Band. At some point with some Dick Tracy money, you can chase that. But if you do it as a private action, I can't go into Wells Fargo Bank and say, "Let me see their bank account." That's gonna take some FBI type stuff. So I'd like to find an answer, but I guess prevention is a large part of it. If we could hang together with shippers and brokers, large and small, and do something about security, at least we make it hard to get away with, and catch some people in the action.
That's it in
Red-handed.
a nutshell. It's about prevention, not apprehension. If we can prevent these frauds from happening by having stronger security protocols, I don't think we have an issue anymore. But we've been so lax because remember, our business is based on trust. Everybody trusts everybody, and these fraudsters look at trust as stupidity and weakness. And that's why we
found a glitch in.
That's why
Lord.
Yeah.
Hank, we have you on the top that we never seen.
You break it up, buddy.
I'm sorry. All right, fix my system.
It's getting close. It's getting close to the witching hour, and it's breaking down on you.
Yeah, technology is great when it works. I say this to find. You can check him out here in the description, in the box website. As always, right.
I'll send you a new copy, buddy. You've got that pretty sharp one.
Hey, I've been using it, and I'm just going to show y'all.
I think Rico's got that book memorized. You know that?
that definitely you can keep you out of some situations. It's very practical to read. You need desk and one in the truck. Just aware of things that are coming down the pipe. Pick the book.
Listen, Rico, I may be the new system, but I'm seeing more questions tonight than I usually do. If people have any interest in trying to find solutions to this new fraud system, they've got my email. Give me a call, and maybe we can put something together.
Absolutely. So, Hank, my scheduled to come and join us as always grateful for you doing so. Free with help and helping us. Treacherous out here. So we appreciate it. Anything that you like to say before we get?
I'm good.
It's always a pleasure having Hank on because it's always informative. We learn so much, and there's so much wisdom there. And I vouch for Hank. We've been using Hank for years, and he's done an amazing job. And he's gotten us out of doo-doo before we got into it several times by giving us good advice.
Thank you, Joe.
Absolutely concur. So, Chuck, I can get a hold of you.
Yeah, if anybody wants to get hold of me, best way, send me an email, Chuck@Traffix, TRAFFIX.com. If you need to get set up with one of the Traffix offices, I'll hold your hand, introduce you to the right people. If you're having some challenges in your business, give me a call. I'm always glad to help our listeners out. Send me an email with a phone number, and I will get to you. I promise I'll call you back. And with that, Rico, I'll let you back her into a hole for another week.
All right.
All right, guys.
We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks,
Hank. All right, Hank. We appreciate it again.
Keep it between.
Hey, something to say, Hank? Oh, okay.
I think we're getting rid of your assistant, Rico.
Well, ladies and and gentlemen, be join us next week. Not this week, but we'll have something. But in the meantime, and in between time, healthy, keep it in between the must talk at your same time, same place next. Good night.
Catch on the flip flop. God bless. Good night.